The rock gave way with a loud crack as a man furiously pried with a crowbar. For 5 years Dr. Amesworth and Mr. Brancroft had searched the scorched and desolate desert. At last they had finally found it. At last they stood upon the threshold of historical immortality. Countless English archaeologists sought the fabled picks of knowledge, leading numerous fruitless expeditions only to find sand and bone in plentiful quantities. Arab men squabbled amongst themselves as they laboured to clear away the large stone debris which obstructed the path into the Temple of Knowledge. Dr. Amesworth watched as the workers cleared away the pale limestone. He removed his spectacles and dabbed away the sweat on his brow with a handkerchief. "Now you are sure this is the temple we are looking for, Doctor?" asked Brancroft, removing his hat and pushing back his greying ginger hair. "I'm absolutely certain, Mr. Brancroft. Fear not, your investment in this expedition is not at all at risk," replied Amesworth. "I should hope not. Anyhow, tell me more of this myth artifact, Doctor," Brancroft asked. Amesworth chuckled and then began. "Why, of course. Ancient tablets from various ruins around 50 to 80 kilometers from here describe a treasure like none other. Many Oxford scholars, I myself included, have spent many years trying to understand these ancient texts, and from our understanding they all speak of a holy object not of this world, an object that contains all knowledge of this world, as well as many mysteries from beyond the stars. The ancients were forbidden to ever use this object, and swore to their gods to forever guard this gift until they may be permitted to wield its almighty power." Brancroft gave a disbelieving smirk. "Now, I say this with no intent of insulting you, good doctor, but I do believe the ancients of this land may have been somewhat deluded. I am a very rational man, Philip. I cannot fathom an object with such power," said Brancroft. "Nonetheless, this artifact was this land's crown jewels, and I do believe historians shall venture from all over to see it in an exhibition. Oh, and pay royalties to you, of course," said Amesworth. "Ah, jolly good. The path is clear. Shall we?" Brancroft said, as he gestured to the narrow opening in the rock face before them. Amesworth nodded. He gestured to a worker who promptly brought him a lit torch. Holding the torch before him, Amesworth squeezed himself through the dark opening. Brancroft followed behind with his own torch. The pathway was narrow, and the walls either side were decorated with hieroglyphic engravings, as well as the low ceiling was. Amesworth and Brancroft crouched down a little as the pathway grew even narrower, as the ground beneath them sloped a little, taking them further underground. "I see something." "Yes, an opening," said Dr. Amesworth, as he peered into the darkness which caught the flickers of his torch. "Ah yes, jolly good. I'm not terribly fond of small spaces," said Mr. Brancroft, struggling to keep his composure. Within a few moments, Amesworth and Brancroft were at the opening at the end of the narrow passage. "Here lies the divine gift," Amesworth translated, as he read the hieroglyphics above the opening. "Well, after you, good doctor," said Brancroft, smirking. Amesworth walked through the opening into an enormous chamber. Giant stone pillars stretched upwards for at least 100 meters, holding the ceiling. Colossal statues of ancient Egyptian gods circled the room, and all looked down at a pyramid-shaped platform in the center of the room. "Good God, man! We have found it! We have finally found it!" Mr. Brancroft exclaimed. Amesworth gave a loud laugh. "Well then, let us have a glance at this so-called divine artifact," said Mr. Brandcroft as he began making his way to the small pyramid in the centre of the room. Ainsworth followed behind him hastily. He was completely overwhelmed with joy at his recent discovery. They climbed to the top of the small pyramid and found a large stone box. "Come, Doctor, help me open this," said Brandcroft as he strained against the lid. The two men pushed aside the heavy slab which covered the square-shaped box and gasped at what they saw. "How extraordinary! It's perfectly preserved," muttered Ainsworth. Brandcroft reached down and picked up the papyrus scroll which lay in the box alone. "Here, Philip, take this," said Brandcroft, handing his torch over to Ainsworth. He examined the papyrus scroll in his hands. The scroll bore no damage nor decay, and Brandcroft turned and ran his fingers along the smooth papyrus roll. "This must surely be a fake. It's absurd how this piece of papyrus hasn't turned to dust after 1,000 years, said Brandcroft, his tone lower and angered. "Here, let me see," Ainsworth asked. Brandcroft began to unroll the papyrus. "Wait, I want to see what's on this bloody thing," growled Brandcroft. Ainsworth watched as Brandcroft stared at the open scroll with wide eyes. He then noticed the blood running from Brandcroft's nose. "Peyton! Peyton, your nose!" Ainsworth shouted. Brandcroft didn't react, nor did he respond. He simply kept his gaze fixed upon the scroll. "Peyton!" Ainsworth shouted again. This time Brandcroft looked up. Tears of blood trickled from his eyes onto his cheeks, meeting the blood which had trickled from his ears. Brandcroft's face bore an expression of sheer dread, and his body began to tremble. "Dear God, Peyton! What?" Ainsworth exclaimed, but was cut off. I know everything there is to know. They created us. They created everything," Brandcroft said, his voice shaky and fearful. "Who are you talking about, Peyton? Put the scroll down now," Ainsworth said, as he edged forwards. Brandcroft drew his gun and pointed his Luger at Ainsworth, stopping him where he stood. "They have grown to hate us very much?" Brandcroft said again, his tone more fearful, and the blood flowing from his eyes grew more intense. "Peyton, come to your senses. Please lower your gun," Ainsworth pleaded. "And I have seen what they will do to us," Brandcroft cried, and put the barrel of his gun beneath his chin. "Peyton, stop!" The gunshot echoed through the Temple of Knowledge.